Hi everyone. My name is Patrick Hansen. I'm Circle's Director for EU Strategy and Policy, and we have the honor of spending the next 30 minutes with you on the most favorite acronym in the EU, MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation. And let's start by settling this most important debate straight away and once and for all. It's actually MiCA. It's spoken MiCA and not MiCA. But I know there's very controversial debates about that. Jokes aside, I think everyone in this room has heard about MiCA. The Markets in Crypto Assets framework is, I think, certainly the most comprehensive regulatory framework globally that is adopted. And it will actually enter into application this year in June for stablecoins like us. It's keeping us very busy at Circle. And later at the end of the year for the rest of the crypto industry. And so today we would like to discuss with this stellar panel what impact MiCA will have on the EU crypto industry, what to expect, how to prepare for MiCA, and also what open items and challenges might still remain for companies to face. And yes, I'm honored to be able to discuss this topic here with David Sabon from the French Ministry of Finance, with Tom Duff Gordon from Coinbase, and also with Faustine Fleuret from Adan. And Faustine, I would say let's kick it off straight away. You are in touch with most of the French crypto industry, I would say. From 1 to 10, how prepared is the French crypto industry, would you say, for MiCA? What's the feedback you're hearing?
So actually, it will depend on who we are talking about when we are talking about the French industry. But what I can say is that the French industry is more ready than in another member states of the EU, because there was a regulation before MiCA that actually inspired MiCA. There is a regulation for French markets since 2019 because there was lots of work done by the public authorities, the Treasury, the IMF, the ACPR. And so since 2019, you have, if you want to provide crypto asset services in France, if you are established in France or not, if you target the French public, you have to be regulated with the IMF and with the ACPR. So the two French authorities for financial and banking entities. So first, what we can say is that the French industry is used to regulation, and especially, that's why I was saying that it will depend on who we are talking about when we are talking about the French industry, especially for those who are already regulated under the French regime, which actively participated on their own side or through Adan, the association, to create MiCA, because they were involved in the debates. So they actually know what is MiCA and what will be expected from them in the entry into application at the end of the year for CASP and sooner for stablecoin issuer. You have actually, let's say, old actors in France, which are regulated for years, which anticipated MiCA by trying to get the French license, which is really close to MiCA. And that's why I wanted to talk about the diversity of the French industry, because you have also very young structure, less mature entities. It will be much more difficult for them in the entry into application of MiCA. First, because if they are not regulated today, they won't benefit from a period of tolerance. If you are regulated as a registered CASP, you will have 18 months more if you want to get compliant with MiCA. It does not mean that you will be able to passport in the EU your French license. It's not the case, but at least you will get more time to get compliant. So for those who are not regulated today, the entry into application is a really urgent issue, and it takes lots of time actually to get compliant, and especially because it's not really the same for stablecoin issuers, because you already have some operational standards that you were expecting from the European supervisors that are ready to help to get compliant, to get the technical details that you need to get compliant, but it's not for a long time, actually, that you get those standards for stablecoin issuers. For CASP, for crypto asset service provider, we're still expecting from those standards. And before having them, it's really difficult. If you really want to start putting in place the procedures, all the provisions that you need to get compliant with MiCA. So since we don't have all the regulatory technical standards for actors, it's hard to anticipate how to get compliant with MiCA. So, well, it's for you maybe a broad landscape, but there will be lots of challenges to raise in the few months remaining before the entry into application to help the actors to be ready in December.
Yeah, a lot of open questions still, and I think a clear call to action for those that want to provide regulated services. I think it's rather sooner than later to get started on that. Thanks, Faustine. Turning to the public sector side and the public administration in France, the French Ministry of Finance. As we all know, MiCA is an EU-wide harmonized regulation, right? So it's directly applicable in all of the 27 member countries. Is there anything left for the French government, the French Ministry of Finance, in terms of implementation? David, could you just give us a few insights about what the French government is preparing in terms of what needs to be done still from the public sector side?
Thank you. On our side, before the entry into application of MiCA, we are in a significant process of updating the French national regulation to take into account all the rules contained in MiCA. We have two main objectives in the coming months. The first one is to adapt the content of the French legislation, for example, to delete all the duplicative provisions, to also have transitional regime for the provisions that would be deleted after the entry into force of MiCA. And the second objective that we have is also to define the objective, the roles, and the powers of the two financial authorities that would be in charge of the implementation and the supervision of MiCA. So this is significant work, and beyond the pure facilitation of the entry into application of MiCA, we have also drafted provisions that go beyond the scope of the MiCA regulation. For example, regarding the proprietary rights of all the crypto assets holders. I'm also thinking about the protection given to the holders of crypto assets that is not set in MiCA, but is up to each national legislation. So this is also something that we have drafted, and we have also other topics such as a pledge with crypto and other things. So this is a large and complex task. We are modifying a lot of codes, a lot of law, including the recent influencer law that was passed last year by the French Parliament. But our work has been greatly helped with the work of a working group that gathered representative of the public administration, representative of the private industry, including crypto industry, and also we had legal experts. So this task was greatly facilitated. So right now we are carrying out a consultation on the several proposals that we have made, and we are waiting for the feedback of all the actors. And our objective with the current work that we are doing is really to maintain the attractiveness of the French legislation regarding crypto assets. We expect to publish these texts at the end of the first semester of 2024, so really in the coming weeks, in the coming months, in order to give legal clarity for all the actors that would be established in France, or all the individuals also interested in this. Another point that I want to mention is that at the same time, we are also adapting the French regulation to the transfer of funds regulation, because it has impact in terms of AML-CFT. And at the EU level, we are also paying a close attention to all the level 2 texts that Faustine was referring to a few moments ago, because of course this is very important. Maybe I could mention some points after. So the message that I have is that all the financial authorities, including the supervisors, that we are really actively preparing the entry into force of MiCA with the adaptation of our legal framework here.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a few work streams going on in the Ministry of Finance, and obviously I think the industry is very keen on contributing to those consultations, and the objective is aligned here, right? Because it's also in the interest of the industry to make sure there's regulatory clarity and that the framework is as attractive as possible. Tom, turning to Coinbase. Coinbase is, one of the largest players in the world, one of the most regulated ones. Recently, I think it has been, widely shared that Coinbase has chosen Ireland as its MiCA hub. Could you share with us the considerations that led to that decision, and also what MiCA preparations look like for Coinbase right now?
Patrick, happy to do, and it's great to be here. So as an American firm, I tell you, being in Europe where we have legal certainty and we're going to have the entry into force of MiCA, that is different to what we're kind of used to back home. So first of all, just to be really clear, we're talking about MiCA. I think I pronounced it right. So we're supportive. We've always leaned into regulation, particularly for centralized players, for CASP. So pleased to be here to have that opportunity. In terms of where did we look, the different member states, we had a long process and we looked at everything that you can imagine, from how good is the supervision, how good is the government support, what about the talent, what about the real estate tax system, et cetera, et cetera. But actually for us, what it came down to was really we had more existing substance and clients papered to our Irish entities. So we've decided for the time being that Ireland is going to be our MiCA hub, and we announced that at the back of last year. And that's where we'll have the supervisory kind of relationship. But I want to be really clear, we don't foresee just having one single kind of like place in Europe. We see the huge attractiveness of places like France, for example, and we will continue to build out and invest in some of the key continental markets. So we were delighted to get our registration here in France at the back end of last year. We have hired a local country manager. We've done a number of NFT events and other things. I think some of them may be in the room here. And we want to be part of the ecosystem, and we want to continue to invest. Certainly, we see the work that David and his colleagues have done at the Banque de France and the ACPR on DeFi and the Loire Pact and things like this. We really see France as setting the agenda along with the trade association. So we will continue to be very present in France and to tailor our app here, and we look forward to growing market share. It's actually our fourth largest market globally. So France is very, very important for Coinbase. Patrick, you asked about kind of MiCA and what are we doing to get prepared. MiCA is good. We support it. We'll come on to some of the things we might have done differently. But I will say MiCA is a high bar. MiCA is hard. I mean, we have 40 plus money transmission licenses in the US. We have a BIT license in New York. We have a trust company. We have licenses in Singapore, all over APAC. MiCA is probably the most comprehensive kind of regulation that we see for CASPs. And I think even for Coinbase, and we've been investing for a long time, I think famously at one point we had more people in legal and compliance than the whole of FTX. So we've been investing in this for a long time to be compliant, to be reg forward. There's still a certain amount of things that we have to do, governance, record keeping, and then a few of the things in level 2, which I think the colleagues have touched on, that I wanted to mention, which we want to think about, things like white paper disclosure. So the liability for the white papers, what you have to put in the white papers for every single kind of token, that's a question mark, and I think will be relatively burdensome here. We're still looking at that. Sustainability disclosures, which ESMA is very focused on. What is the energy kind of intensity of the consensus mechanism behind every single token? And all the different issuers have to kind of do that, all the CASPs. So things like this are a little tricky, and we want to make sure that Europe is able to really benefit from MiCA and be an attractive ecosystem. And that just means calibrating some of these kind of level 2 measures right to ensure that we don't create an unforeseen kind of advantage or incentive for people to kick off a project in a different location where potentially some of those rules are a bit lighter.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue into the next block of questions that I was going to ask. You mentioned potential obstacles, potential operational challenges, and actually, since we're months away from MiCA's entry into application, and I think many builders, startups, innovators are out there, I'd love to discuss with all of you what the remaining obstacles are in order to make that MiCA framework that we have spent so much time discussing these last couple of years. What are the remaining obstacles to make that a success, right, for the industry? So maybe Faustine, starting with you, since you have member companies across all different verticals, NFT platforms, DeFi protocols, regulated crypto custodians, for example. From your conversations with these variety of players, where do you see the most pressing challenges still? What are the areas that you feel like we still need to solve in order to make that framework actually workable in practice for the industry?
So you were mentioning NFT platforms and DeFi actors. For those, actually, they should not be in the scope of MiCA. But there's a challenge of being sure that they are out of the scope of MiCA, because there are still some clarifications that we're waiting on what could be NFT actors in the scope of MiCA, what are the NFT that could qualify as crypto assets, and what is decentralization, what is decentralized finance. And since we don't have those clarifications, it can be sometimes uncomfortable for those actors to be sure that they are out of the scope of MiCA. And once we are clear about the scope, the framework of those new innovations that are not covered by MiCA must be built. And Tom, you were mentioning some works that are being done in France regarding the framework on DeFi. There is actually lots of work that is already done to give a vision on the next regulatory principles for DeFi and NFT actors, but there is still work to do, and that's why the actors that might be covered should participate in those debates. And right now, because even if this framework is expected for the, let's say, 3 years that are coming, the work is now, if you wish, to give all the insights, all the relevant inputs for public policymakers and regulators to make this regulation adapted and proportionate. So this is for the NFT, DeFi, the actors that are not supposed not to be covered by MiCA. When it comes to the ones that are clearly in the scope of MiCA, yes, there are lots of challenges, I would say, aside from the ones that I've already mentioned, but maybe just to come back on the delays, because the entry into application of MiCA is quite soon. It means that unless you are already regulated in France, for example, and in some other member states, it depends on the member states, you have to be compliant at the end of December to be able to provide your services in the EU. So it means that if you are not authorized, you can't launch your activity, and you have to get your license before. And the delays can be up to the actors, which we say we need the level 2 text in order to get all the relevant details to prepare the files, the application. But it's also up to regulators to be able to authorize in due time the actors. And that's why we do need maybe more staff for regulators to be able to treat all those files, and especially because as France is seen as a place that is favorable to exercise your EU activity, we expect lots of files to come on the desk of a French regulator. So there is a question of delay that can be quite frightening for actors. There is a question about supervision also, because if you have a regulation, you need a supervisor. Otherwise, it's not really credible. It means that you can have a regulation that the good actors will follow the rules, but if you don't have supervision, you don't have sanctions. The actors that are actually hampering investor protection or are not complying with the objectives of regulation, they will still be able to provide their services, and that's what will be detrimental to the confidence in markets and also to the access of users to the actors that are effectively regulated. So we do need a supervision alongside the regulation, and that's why we really pay attention to the current consultation of the ESMA on reverse solicitation, because we can expect reverse solicitation to be abused in order for foreign actors that do not wish to be regulated to anyway provide their services to EU citizens without complying with the rules, so without participating in the common objectives that the industry and the public policymakers have in terms of investor protection and financial stability.
Yeah, thank you for that. And by the way, the ESMA consultation mentioned, that's currently open and ongoing. So if there's interest out there, feel free to contribute. And I can only agree, Faustine. I mean, the timelines are indeed challenging, especially since for some of the standards and guidelines, we haven't seen the final publications from the EU authorities, right? And we're supposed to be compliant in a matter of months without having seen the final guidelines and the final standards. So that's indeed a challenge that hopefully the industry will overcome. David, from a public side from the French Ministry of Finance, is there any remaining legal obstacle, or would you say, the ministry is prepared for MiCA's entry into force?
Well, we have identified a few issues where these issues have gathered a lot of attention. The first one is the transitional period for all the crypto asset service providers that are already authorized. As a reminder, the French crypto asset service providers, they have until the 1st July of 2026 to get a license as crypto asset service providers under MiCA. Here, France has decided to use the maximum opportunity given by the regulation, because we wanted to give sufficient time for all the actors to get ready. And you mentioned all the debate about the level 2 text, and this was something important for us to give sufficient time to get prepared. On the transitional period, we have also heard concerns, and Faustine just mentioned them, about the capacity of the supervisors to get license. What I want to say is that the supervisors, they are ready. They have participated in the drafting of all the level 2 text, RTS, ITS guidelines, so they are ready. Their staff have been increased, and they are really, they really want to help all the crypto asset service providers to switch to the MiCA regime. So this is something very, very important on our side. As said before, once all the text, all the level 2 text will be published, I would urge all the actors to prepare very actively their authorization as crypto asset service providers, and not to wait until the last months of 2026. But once again, we have decided to give all the opportunity given by MiCA. The second point is on the reverse solicitation that Faustine was also referring to. Once again, it was a topic that gained a lot of attention during MiCA negotiations. And since MiCA has strengthened the requirements to provide crypto asset services in the EU, it was very welcome to have a very narrow interpretation of reverse solicitation. And this is the case under the guidelines of ESMA that are under public consultation. So I can only reiterate to all the people here to participate in the public consultation of ESMA. The third topic where we are seeing not legal obstacles, but more material obstacles, is on the access to banking accounts for crypto asset service providers and stablecoin issuers. This is a kind of long-term issue. We had already legislation on this. We had reports. We had a lot of warnings about this. We had discussion with Adan also and with the Faustine's team. We've seen that there has been some improvement in the last months, but this is not sufficient. We want to make this smoother for all the actors, so that's why we have made some proposals in that sense in the text that are under consultation right now. And on the last issue where we are seeing a lot of attention, as Faustine mentioned, is really on the implementation phase of MiCA, when it will be about the authorization process and about the supervision process. You know that this is, of course, a text that we are very attached to. We are expecting that it would deliver good results. But inevitably, since we are dealing with very innovative actors, very innovative industry, there will be questions in terms of implementation. So my message here is to say that the French Treasury will always be open to discuss the difficulties that will arrive. This is something that would happen. We can't set everything in the level 1 text, so we will be ready to discuss with all the actors, all the stakeholders, in order to draw all the lessons, because in the coming months we will be very attached to draw the lessons of the authorization phase, the transition phase, and also all the supervision in order to get things better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it took years to get MiCA adopted, right? Its implementation won't be overnight, and it's a long road that might be bumpy in the beginning. Tom, from your perspective, we're talking about challenges in MiCA. We touched a few already: banking, reverse solicitation, other issues. If you could go back, 2 years or so, and imagine the EU policymakers still discussing MiCA and the econ, in the EU Parliament, for example. In hindsight, with your knowledge of today, what are the 2 or 3 issues that, if you had the chance, you would go back and say, we need a few adaptations here or a little more work there?
Gosh, good question. So we think MiCA was pretty good. So if I had my magic wand, I wouldn't use it too much, but I guess there would be a couple of things. One would be stablecoins, and the second area would be custody. So I think if I had my magic wand, I would go back and on stablecoins, I mean, speaking here in the kind of this building, defer to all the experts, but we want to see a really flourishing market in Europe for stablecoins. We want to see a Eurocoin, Circle have one. We want to see others in that ecosystem. And in the future, there will be CBDC, and there's going to be stablecoins, potentially, and tokenized deposits. These are the three kind of ways that money is going to move on chain. We want to see a mixed payments ecosystem where all of those can compete on a level playing field together. And we see huge advantages in stablecoins. But when we look at MiCA, we see a ban on interest. We see quite high capital requirements, considering that you don't really have any financial risk. It's just operational risk. We see kind of caps for non-euro stablecoins. We're not sure that necessarily MiCA thought about a kind of a global stablecoin, which others subsequently have done, that already exists in the market. So I think from a stablecoin perspective, if I had that magic wand, I would go back and I think I would change some of those things to try and foster that innovation within the EU. And I think that's important, not just because stablecoins are a trading pair within the crypto ecosystem, but as we build out financial asset tokenization, real world tokenization, stablecoins are going to be so critical as the cash leg, for that. So getting stablecoins right, I think is really important. We might also clarify that stablecoins don't fall under payment services kind of rules and regulations, PSD and PSR. I think the trouble is if they do that, stablecoin transactions, particularly if they're trading, they're not exempted, then we could see real issues around applying payment law to stablecoins, things like the reversibility of transactions, which you just can't do in crypto. So I think I would go and I would change some of the level one kind of text around stablecoins to really ensure that we have innovation in that market. The other area, I think, speaking now more from a CASP, from an exchange perspective, would be on custody. So I have my kind of 3 S's, where I think, we want to see a pragmatic implementation of the kind of the custody rules. So the first one is around security. Best practice on custody is actually to take the different key shards and to distribute them in different jurisdictions with different people, not to create a honeypot. So you outsource some of that kind of custody or kind of parts of it so that when you bring the key material back together, that is harder to do and it's much more kind of secure. The other one is staking. So staking, I think, is a permitted activity under MiCA within that kind of custodial framework. But again, we would like probably to see a bit more kind of clarity on that. The third S is segregation. Clearly, we have to segregate firm assets from client assets. But at any one time, the way that you run staking, you run an exchange, you'll have a de minimis amount of firm assets in the kind of client omnibus, very, very small level. And then the final thing on custody is just to recognize how crypto works with atomic settlement. We have to pre-fund at the exchange a small amount of liquidity such that we can kind of match buyers and sellers, as it were. And so we're going to have like vaults and cold storage, and we're going to have the vast amount of client assets kind of in trust and cold. But then there will be a trust framework, and there will be a certain amount of client assets at any one time which are pre-funded on the exchange such that we can have that immediate kind of anatomic settlement. All of that, I think, is kind of within MiCA, probably works. But, again, we could have done perhaps with a little bit more kind of clarity on that. So I think those would be my 2 areas that I would go back to.
Yeah, luckily, MiCA is entering into application this year, but at the end of the year, we'll actually see already the first interim MiCA review from the EU Commission. So that might be an occasion to bring all of these points up again. With only a few minutes remaining, I'd love to broaden the scope of the discussion a little bit. We discussed what's being done on the preparedness side. We've been discussing a few challenges that still exist with MiCA. I'd love to just look a little bit into the future, do a lightning round potentially even on what to expect. And David, maybe let's start with the Ministry of Finance side. The French, we have discussed that earlier, the French government has been a pioneer, a first mover in this space. Through the DASP framework, it has attracted many companies, including Circle to Paris in France. And so I'm wondering, once MiCA has entered into application and it's harmonized across the EU, what leverage and what levers does France still have in order to position itself in a competitive way as a welcoming, thriving crypto hub?
Well, on this, as you know, France has a clear objective of being a hub for crypto, and that's what we are seeing now is that there are many international actors, including Circle, that has chosen France to be their European headquarters. So the thing is that even if we had, as you mentioned, a national regime that has gained some form of success, our task is not ending with the entry into application of MiCA. For example, I would mention some topics. For example, on DeFi, Tom was mentioning the public consultation that have been done and conducted by our financial supervisors. This is an area that we are exploring and where we are seeing a lot of promising things. With this is at the international level something that we are seeing as a major topic of interest. On the non-fungible tokens, you may remember that President Macron has urged the museum to get an interest on NFTs. In terms of a legal framework, the Parliament has recently adopted an experimental framework for NFTs used for gaming. We have also, under MiCA, there will be a report published by the European Commission. And we will be, of course, very cautious to the concept of this report because we want NFTs to really be used very innovatively, and we don't want the NFTs to be stopped with prematurate regulation. On the tokenization of finance also, this is a topic where we are seeing lots of interest because at the French Ministry of Finance, we consider that this is a new frontier for finance. So for us, you may have seen that in France there have been a lot of experiments that have been conducted with Banque de France, with other public institutions. And for us, such trend underlines the fact that we need to have digital euro for tokenization, for tokenized use cases. And this is a topic where France has been in advance compared to other countries. And this is part of France strategy in order to foster tokenization of finance. We are encouraging the ECB to step up its work on the design and the deployment of digital euro for wholesale. And the last point that Tom also mentioned is the articulation of the crypto regulation and the payment service regulation. This is also a topic that will be discussed in the coming months at the EU level, and we will be we are in favor of having the smoothest application of the payment regulation to crypto, taking, of course, into consideration all the DLT specificities.
Yeah, strong +1 on this one, a critical issue, and as we heard, the regulatory and legislative work never stops in Europe and in France. Tom, from your side point of view, European exchange volume is fairly small compared to Asian or US based trading. Just very briefly, how do you think MiCA will affect trading and exchange market structure in the EU? Also, based on the existing knowledge that oftentimes regulation leads to some kind of consolidation, right? How do you see the exchange market structure looking like in Europe in 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, good question. Get out my crystal ball. Look, we think that MiCA should really, that should bring trust, right? Because we're going to have regulatory clarity. We're going to have kind of certainty. That'll bring investment from actors like ourselves, as well as kind of, actors and participants in exchanges that are local. That should also mean that retailers feel that they can get more involved, that they're more protected. We've seen the positive price action recently with the ETFs in the US and others. So MiCA should really be a platform, right, to kind of attract more activity and to really, really build the ecosystem. As I said before, MiCA is a high bar to hit from a compliance perspective. So I think you could necessarily see a barrier to entry beginning to kind of emerge. And over time, I wouldn't be surprised if that did lead to some consolidation. MiCA obviously gives you the ability to place yourself in one member state and to have passporting through all. And so over time, we'll probably see a natural kind of, agglomeration of activity within a certain number of big member states and amongst a number of big platforms. The one thing that I hope is that we don't miscalibrate some of the kind of the burdens in the level 2, such that smaller projects that want to get started actually see a faster way and a faster route to market into some other places. So that would just be my one caveat. But overall, we're bullish and hopeful that MiCA sets a really strong, powerful foundation. It's going to attract investment, and I think retailers will feel like now is a good time to get back into the market. So we're looking forward to it.
And Faustine, final word for you. You joined our Circle Forum last year. You're joining this year again. If we meet again next year, what would be, a scenario, if you look at the crypto industry, where you would say in a year or two from now, undeniably looking at the market today, MiCA was a success, so in the positive way? And what needs to happen if we think about, the worst case, the dystopia? What needs to happen that in a year or two from now, we meet again here and look at the crypto market in the EU and you say, probably MiCA wasn't a success from a business point of view?
And MiCA will be a success, won't be a failure if we can bring every actors from the smallest ones in this regulated area that will become EU markets. We can't be happy with MiCA if we only have the big players that survive to MiCA. So there is a big challenge of bringing the young structure that wish to participate in building Web3 and crypto markets. And it will also be a success and won't be a failure if we have unregulated actors that cannot provide the services to the EU market. So we do need to act both on the authorization process, but also the supervisory powers, so that this regulation do reach the objectives that, as I said, it's a common goal of the industry and public policy makers that we have this regulation that is successful. And so, well, let's see in 1 year who will be already regulated under MiCA, and if maybe not next year, but in the 2-3 coming years, those regulated actors are also the most competitive actors in the world.
I think that's a good place to end, and we'll obviously all work together to make that scenario, the positive one, happen in the next year. So thank you very much, Faustine, thank you very much, David, and thank you, Tom, for that look into MiCA.